Hey, Husker fans. Evan Bland here with Jimmy Watkins. Sam McEwen will be joining us soon. So
Sam's Dr. Pepper is here.
His Dr. Pepper is cold. It's getting warmer. He will be joining us in the next 5 or 10 minutes or so. So we can look forward to that early in this Pick Six podcast. It's we're right on the precipice of April, and we've got a lot going on. We're going to get into some Nebraska football portal needs today. We're going to talk about Nebraska men's sports in general and some of the commonalities and the struggles there. We're going to kind of break that down as depressing as maybe that can be.
What are we supposed to talk about? What's the good news?
Yeah,
going on?
We're not pumping sunshine.
Basketball season is over. Volleyball is not here yet. Where's the good news?
Volleyball.
Bowling. Right. We missed our window.
Bowling's the 2 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
So you've got that. Wrestling finished a strong season. So, yeah, we could have, if we catered a podcast entirely to the positives in Nebraska athletics, it would be, bowling, wrestling, rifle, volleyball,
no disrespect, I don't know that many people would listen.
Well, if we wanted to have a positive, facing sort of discussion.
We're journalists. We tell the truth.
Yeah, nothing
the truth
but the
is
truth.
It's bad out here, folks.
So we're going to get into all that when Sam joins us. But right now we have the Nebraska men's basketball beat writer and the Nebraska baseball beat writer sitting here with you. So we're going to talk about that for a few minutes. There have been a lot of moves going on the basketball side, Jimmy. The big shoe that dropped this week was the return of Derek Walker. I mean, what does that mean for a program that struggled last year? He comes back. I guess, how does that affect the outlook for next season? Yeah,
I'm going to do the thing that apparently everyone has to do when a transfer or return gets announced. It wasn't surprising. I don't know why everyone has to tell everyone they weren't surprised. If you weren't that surprised, and this is not, specific to Nebraska, but this happens all over the place. If you weren't surprised, you should have reported it. That's my personal opinion. So everyone, I think, is at least a little bit surprised by these announcements. We did expect Derek Walker to come back, though.
You weren't surprised? Yeah.
No, I was not surprised. He is the standard bearer for Nebraska basketball. It's quite a standard to bear, but Derek, by all accounts, does everything right. I think we can all see that Derek gets the most out of what he was given talent-wise. He does not have an incredible vertical leap. He's not gifted with exceptional quickness, but he's skilled. He makes good reads as a passer. He's developed into a strong below-the-rim finisher. He just broke the school record for field goal percentage. So it's good to have that person around when you're going to have another largely young team, especially at the big man spot. What they're working with right now is Derek. Wilhelm Breidenbach, who played 10 games before missing the rest of the season with a knee injury. Blaise Keita, who's only played junior college basketball, and Oleg Koyanets, who has not seen the floor yet for Nebraska. That's 10 combined games of Division I basketball. Derek Walker has played 112. They need those the wisdom that comes with 112 games of experience. The rest of the team needs that experience too, because there's just if it's not Derek Walker, we still don't know about Trey McGowens and Lat Mayen, but if it's not Derek Walker, you're pointing to guys like C.J. Wilcher, who's a good player and who also does a lot of the right things, but he's a redshirt sophomore he played a little bit at Xavier his freshman year, but most of his experience in Division I college basketball is on a 10-win team. So it's hard to point to a guy like that as a standard bearer. Derek Walker has won an SEC championship at Tennessee. That is valuable experience. He was a bit player on that team, but he was there. He saw what it took. He knows what it's like to be in a winning environment like that. So that's I think that's the most important part of the Derek Walker news. Of course, on the court, we just mentioned he's good on the floor, below the rim finisher. He's a good defender. He's a good team defender. He knows where to be. He's strong. He doesn't have the size to deal with guys like Hunter Dickinson and Kofi Coburn, who may not be in the Big Ten next year, but guys like them always will be. But he'll stand his ground, and he's not afraid of those dudes. He makes it abundantly clear every time you ask him about them that he's not afraid of those dudes. So his presence is very important. Nebraska needs an elder statesman like that. He's he knows Fred really well. He knows Fred's system really well. He's the only player still remaining from Fred's first roster, even though he sat out that first year due to transfer. Then he missed half of the next year due to suspension. He knows how things are supposed to work around there. He knows how things are supposed to work in a successful college basketball program. So it's good news that he's back.
That's a good point. Like, of all the turnover on that roster, he's the guy who's been there throughout.
He's like Kevin Love on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Kevin Love was supposed to be gone 6 different times by now. Not in that way. He's just that it's strange that Kevin Love is the last guy left from the LeBron championship team.
And Walker, he's taken part in senior night twice, I think, right?
Yeah, they'll be going for a third go round
here
next
he is
year.
again. It's like, so you say it's not surprising. Is it not surprising because he didn't have pro prospects? Like, because he has his trucking company, and like it was a matter of, do you start on that or do you come back for one more year? Was that kind of the thought process?
That's part of it. I also think that he's the guy of the three that has the most use to Nebraska, and Nebraska has the most use to him. If Derek Walker does want to play pro basketball, which I assume every Division I college basketball player does, he needs another year. I don't think he's on a ton of radars in that regard right now. So, yeah, it's not surprising because he's the guy that can benefit the program and himself the most from making that decision. The other thing that this team needs that he can provide and did provide for every year he's been here is they need a spokesman. They need someone to send up to a podium after a loss. CJ Wilcher's done that a couple of times this year, but Derek has done it, and he's good at telling reporters things without actually telling them anything. And that's a good skill. I mean, I don't personally enjoy the skill that much, but that's a good skill for a basketball team to have. So it's good to have Derek back for Nebraska, and it's good to have a familiar face around for me.
So reset what's left then. So there are still a few decisions to be made, and then what's the timeline for these decisions before it's locked in?
I have heard that Trey and Ladd are going to be a little bit longer on their decision-making timeline just because it sounds like they're not sure. I think that if you asked me to make a prediction, I would say that neither of them come back. I think Nebraska could quite honestly be better served giving Latt's scholarship to someone else at this point. They brought him in, coining him in as an all-world shooter. He hasn't been that. He, like Derek, brings leadership, brings defensive intensity and intelligence, but they need shooting. They need someone who can. They need more offense. That's what that team's supposed to be. So they need that. Trey McGowan's from the beginning of the season. I was looking up. It was at Big Ten Media Day. You said this is our last year, and I wondered throughout the season if the foot injury might change that. From what I have gathered, I don't think that has changed. I don't think Trey will be back. Maybe he's trying to jumpstart a professional career overseas. Maybe he's going to, I don't know if he can get a shot in the G League, something like that. But I don't think either of those guys are back.
We've been joined by Sam McEwen, whose Dr. Pepper continues to warm just a little bit. We were monitoring the temperature of your drink.
Oh yeah, did you grab it?
No, well, we eyeballed it. No, we did not grab your drink. Welcome.
Allergies are kicking my
Welcome
ass
in.
today. God, I hate allergies.
Sniffles?
Sniffles? Yeah, and they're allergies. The allergies create that. Yes.
Okay, I'm allergy.
Red eyes, all
I'm
that.
allergy privileged.
And
I don't know.
No, it's not C19. It's not that. You know when you have allergies.
What's the worst? What's the worst part of allergies? Is it the stuffiness, the watery eyes, the
sneezing?
Okay.
So like this is full up hay fever. Like it's not hay fever season, but the sneezing, the eyes, like no, the stuffiness you can handle because you just exit that. The the moderation of allergy medication. So like you load up on Zyrtec, and some people use Claritin. I'm a Zyrtec person.
Okay.
You only use Benadryl if you want to go to sleep because that's not. I mean, that'll not.
On that note, can I tell you guys a quick story?
Yes.
Related to that.
Yeah.
When I was in college, there's a lot going on with this story. So I took a class that I thought was anthropology, like, the study of human culture.
Yes.
This was a subsect of anthropology that ended up being like evolution of man. We were basically like digging for fossils in class. It was a dinosaur class. I wasn't prepared for that. I was failing this class the entire semester because it was really hard. and it was really early in the
Really
morning.
hard.
It was really hard. It was
Really
dense.
early
The
in the
material
morning, more
material
likely.
was dense. It was
Okay.
okay. I attended class in this regard for the most part because I felt like I had to because I was failing.
Yeah, right.
And so the night before the final, I believe I needed a B or something to pass the class. And I'm sick. It's in the spring.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
It's not going well. I'm taking Advil while studying. What I didn't know, I was taking Advil PM. So I'm in my dorm room and I'm fighting to stay awake. Like, man, I'm just so tired. So tired. And I woke up and I went to pop another Advil and well, that's not going to help. So I basically pass out studying due to Advil PM. I wake up the next morning. I'm looking at the tests. I'm just like, there's just no shot I know any of this stuff. Like, I'm flipping pages, don't know that one, we're looking, like, on a test like that, you're looking for a layup, just like one that I know to get the ball rolling. Nothing. So I ended up just kind of crowdsourcing answers and looking off everyone's paper.
Crowdsourcing.
And I got a 100% on the final and an A in the class because the final was heavily weighted.
You got
Wow.
an A in the class.
A in
It
the
was
class.
really hard, but you got an A.
Because of the final.
Crowdsourcing. That's an interesting way of
That's
describing
a good way to
that.
put it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You better hope Ohio U's not.
Degree's already framed, man.
Oh, that's.
Already framed.
Hey, if they could take away Reggie Bush's Heisman,
That's
In the
true.
era of NIL.
this is
In
the
the era
Ohio
of
U's
NIL.
Heisman Coalition.
Yeah, someone's going to tag, Ohio academics or whatever.
Please don't.
That's
They're not going.
My mom will be very upset.
well, that's quite the story.
So if you hear me snuffling or sniffling, it's not because I'm, because there was a point during, the pandemic. It's like, are you stuffed up? Does that mean you? Not in this moment. It doesn't. I've had COVID. I think I had it twice. I had it for sure once, and stuffed up was not what I felt at all. Like, it was more like an alien feeling of your whole body. But stuffed up, no. I didn't have any. I didn't have any allergies. It was it's a unique experience.
Somebody that has been stuffed up is Nebraska athletics.
Oh boy!
For a long time. That's the segue.
Segway Hall of Fame.
I
They're
thought
allergic
so. Like
to winning.
This conversation seems timely in that I think that the realization has set in that baseball is not the white knight that men's team sports have been looking for this year. They fall to Creighton this week. All the numbers suggest that this is a team that's going to be struggling to make the Big Ten
A
tournament.
very poor game.
Which is
that did not ennoble baseball.
No, and it wasn't an outlier. I mean, that's sort of how they played a lot of the years. So, in the bigger sense, obviously we've talked a lot about football and basketball. Now baseball kind of joins the team struggle bus this year. What's a commonality, at least in this year, say in the last year or two, between these men's sports, these major men's sports, where they consistently have come up short?
I don't know. This is more of I don't know if it's more of a cause, less of a cause, more of a symptom, but the commonality that I've noticed since being here is that there's always hope in the beginning, right? There's like beginning of last football season, what do we predict them to go 7-5 or something like that?
Right.
They did not do that. Nebraska basketball was hosting all these national guys, and then you got to see these Fred Hoiberg practices. I don't know how anyone's going to guard these guys. The offense is crazy. This is a bubble team. This could be a tournament team. I think Andy Katz from Big Ten Network actually picked them to make the tournament. That didn't happen. Baseball, we got Evans writing stories, and these are all valid angles to take. Like, if Nebraska is a big time baseball player, then they retool. They don't rebuild, they retool. This is a reloading year for Nebraska. Can they still win the Big Ten? It doesn't look like they can. And so I compare this. I think there's some similarities. Sam would know this. His wife's a Browns fan. I come from Cleveland. I see a lot of similarities between Cleveland Browns fans and Nebraska athletics fans in that the beginning of the season, there was, for a long time, there's always this hope.
Yeah,
like,
there
this
is,
is the
yeah.
year. There's always next year.
Right.
You get to, there's always next year about 4 games into the season, but there is always next year. I wonder if there's a breaking point where, like, they're all like, when you care about something that much as a sports fan, you're always going to keep coming back. But I wonder if the optimism dwindles. I wonder if fans become, and maybe have already become, more cynical and start to like, okay, Maybe I'm not going to renew my season tickets blindly every year. You need to show me something at a certain point. So that's the commonality I see, is just people getting their hopes up, people getting their hopes dashed, and I wonder what sort of impact that has on future generations of fans and the psyches of fans that already exist.
Well, we can contrast it to the women's sports, which have been relatively successful. But we'll start with the men's sports and say that, that phrase of like the sum being greater than the parts. In Nebraska, men's athletics and those big three sports, the parts are greater than the sum. And so everything is about this guy or this star or this specific player playing well or this guy's NIL contract or this storyline or that storyline.
Recruiting rankings.
But the sum is not great. And so Nebraska has a chance to have 4 or 5 players drafted in the 22 NFL draft. That's true. That could actually happen. It could be Doman, Taylor Britt, Damian Daniels, maybe Samari Toure. I think he ran a pretty good 40.
Juergens.
And Juergens. Those 5 guys could legitimately get drafted. I think that's entirely possible. That is a 7 or 8 win, even a 9 win kind of NFL draft haul, and they won 3 games. So that's part of it. I think that's part of the story, is that the sum is not good enough. The sum is not greater. Bryce McGowan's had a great season. He was a part. Did not contribute much to the sum. Derek Walker had a record-breaking season as it relates to field goal percentage. He was a part. It wasn't a great sum.
Alonzo Verge led the Big Ten in assists.
I know. And that's something.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
And then, in baseball, baseball didn't do anything wrong last year. They had a great year. I think this year, I would say that the baseball team, and you know this better than I do, they lost a lot of good players.
Sure.
They lost a lot of good pitchers. And so, did they come in with maybe a little bit too much of a, maybe. Yeah, it's possible. But I think the other thing is that what they didn't have last year, and every Nebraska baseball team has to contend with except for last year's team, is that first month where you're on the road and you're playing teams that have been outside way more than you have, and they're just used to it. And I think that Nebraska baseball struggled a little bit in that context, and then I think they got a little, whatever you want to call it, and they lost some games they shouldn't have lost. I think they maybe went in against UNO with a little bit of a big head. They went in against Texas A&M Corporate Christie thinking, well, we won 5 in a row, so we're going to, and it just didn't happen. So I think that's some of it. I think when you compare it to the women's programs that have been successful, the women's basketball program, the volleyball program, I think that the sum is greater than the parts, although the parts for the Nebraska volleyball program are always really good. But I think the other piece is just, seasoned, experienced coaching. I think John Cook has seen it all and kind of done it all. And I think Amy Williams is finally, after, I think in her 6th year, she really kind of settled into the kind of team that she really wanted. I think Amy's a good person who assumed a lot of the players who had been left over from Connie's era, got to an NCAA tournament early, but ultimately was playing with some players for 4 years that I don't know that she would have recruited. And I think once she sort of recycled all her players in there, I think you're starting to see her vision. That just took time. With Fred, I think the biggest issue with basketball to me is the biggest one. I and maybe I'm being unfair to basketball and too nice to football, but with basketball, that has gone really, really, that's been a disaster. There's just no other way to put that. To me, it's a complete do-over, and if you want to do it over with Fred, that's fine. But if he wins 13 games next year, I wouldn't fire him, because there's no way that they're going to go from what they were this year to 21 wins next year. That seems very, very unlikely. It was he came in with a paradigm that did not work.
Look what Iowa State just did, though. They went from 0 and whatever in the Big 12 to the Sweet 16 in a year.
Yeah.
So
that paradigm worked, though. And Fred's paradigm did not work.
That's an unfair expectation to set. You can't.
No, I understand.
You can point to that and say, "Hey, look, it's possible."
Right.
But you can't point to that and say, "Hey, you should do that." We can't be doing that, especially because, like Sam said, they are in the midst of. It seems like from the outside, we'll see the last remaining hire on the staff will have a lot to do with our perception of this, it seems like they are changing their approach to team building. They just brought in a 4-man freshman class. They are obviously going to still rely on the transfer portal some, but even in Matt Abdelmassih's last year, they were more focused on recruiting freshmen and trying to build out their recruiting class or their roster that way. So particularly when you are trying to do that, it is very difficult to expect quick gains like that.
And they, the first year, Tim Miles didn't leave them with much. We all agree on that. But I mean, the team that they assembled was not a team that was going to win a lot of games. I mean, it just wasn't. And then the following year, I thought they assembled a pretty good team. COVID kind of, cut into that, but the paradigm just didn't work. And I don't know enough about Iowa State basketball to speak intelligently on TJ Otzelberger's approach. But I will say that, I know a couple of the players on that team, and again, I think the thing that Fred's going to have to assess, and I'm not trying to be harsh when I say this, is winning the point, or is, helping give a handful of players reach their NBA dreams the point? And maybe once, can those things sync up? Because, I'm not sure they can. Like, I think winning is the point. Even at the college athletic level, I understand that we've had a lot of changes, and that there's things about student athlete welfare and what do you call it, compensation that are important. But winning is the point in the professional leagues too, with the exception of minor league baseball. And winning is the point in college. And I think they strayed away from that a little. I don't know what was going on within that program over the last year, but I'm not sure winning was on the mind of some of the top players on the team. I'm just not sure. Because if it was, you would have seen better defense. You saw possession after possession where they didn't play defense. Guys just didn't work hard. And I just, and maybe player accountability is an issue with football too. That I know for a fact that Scott feels like his staff had to do too much, especially on offense, and they're trying to think that. Baseball to me seems like an outlier. What is going on with them?
I think there was an underestimation about what they lost. I mean, all the captains, 700-plus career starts in the outfield. The Big Ten Player of the Year, who happened to be a shutdown closer, in Spencer Schwellenbach. And, like we've said on here before, I did not pick Nebraska to win the Big Ten in baseball this year because of that. I picked them to finish third, which is probably high still. But, like, you look nationally, everybody picked Nebraska to win it. And what our discussion at the time was, if you do that, you have to assume you're assuming a lot. You're assuming that the coaching staff is going to develop these guys, that they're going to take that next step immediately, and it just hasn't happened. And maybe it'll pay off for them next year when these guys have some seasoning. But I think there was in college, in college baseball, there's not nearly as many voices as there are in college basketball and college football in terms of analysts and things like that. So I think you hear a couple voices, and there's sort of a laziness to it where it's like, well, Nebraska won it last year. Yeah, they're probably going to be winning again this year. Like, I think there was a lot of that nationally going on, but it's just a young team. I think that's all there is to it. And the offense has struggled historically. Like, they're on pace to be Nebraska's second lowest scoring offense in 46 years if they keep at it. The pitching's been okay. I would say
it has been okay.
It's been good enough.
It hasn't been terrible. And that's what they lost more of.
Yeah.
But it hasn't. Went back and looked at the numbers, and I'm like, their pitching is not that bad, and their pitching wasn't that bad against Creighton.
No, it wasn't. And they were using young guys like freshmen and sophomores. But the offense has been the big thing. Like, even the guys, Max Anderson hit 300 plus all year last year. He hasn't approached that to this point. Cam Chick is kind of starting to come along, but he had a really slow start. They benched him for a while.
So they had first and third with 0 outs in the bottom of the 8th against Creighton. Was that right? First and third?
7th and the 8th.
7th and 8th. So I'll go to the 8th because that one I remember really well. I know there was a bang-bang play in there. And
well, there should have been a bang-bang play.
Yeah. But, my goodness. You have that kid on the ropes, and he finished the game. Mm-hmm. And they could not hit a slider.
Right.
And I think he got away with Steyer got away with a balk. He picked a guy off, and I'll show you the video. I think he got away with a balk on the pick off at first. I don't think he came set.
Could
I
be.
think he they have a good camera angle of it, and so I think Creighton got away with one there.
I would say that the last thing that Nebraska's fan base needs is another reason to point at officials.
No, I mean,
I
I'm
hate
not saying
those.
that
I
an
hate that
umpire
dialogue.
could
I know
caught
you're
this.
not. I know.
but unfortunately, the
that
camera angle was such that, and balks are notoriously hard to call. They're just impossible to call. But I think that kid actually got away with one. But that part is what it is. It's like they puckered. In both innings, they had opportunities to finish that, to basically break it open, and they could not hit the ball.
Well, he goes strikeout, and then grounder to first, which is bobbled by Creighton. You'd think, hey, this is going to be a tight play. Nebraska's going to score. The runner trips halfway down the line. I mean, that's the kind
And
of
he did
season
come into
that
the
it's been.
grass. And that grass was high.
This is another commonality between the three sports. We're so close.
Yeah.
It's just in winning time, we can't do it. Nebraska baseball is runners in scoring position. The bats aren't there. Football, it's look at all these one-score losses they have. Basketball, I'm less inclined to believe the we're so close argument because they got blown out more times in their third year than they did in their first year. But Ohio State goes to overtime, winnable game. Illinois comes down at the end. I think it finished as a 10-point game, but that was a very close game with like 2 minutes to go, minute left. Couldn't get it done. NC State couldn't get it done. They pointed to NC State. If we win NC State, maybe we win a couple more of those.
Oh, I think
that's
was
a comedy.
game.
You
no
know,
question.
That's a
you
commonality.
talk about like the contrast between men's and women's sports. Like the women, there's always space to be surprised. Like volleyball, even with like the highest standard in the athletic department, found a way to surprise last year. The way that they beat Texas on the road and go to the Final Four and contend. Women's basketball surprised this year. They coalesced. They made the tournament. It was a fun team to watch. Contrast that with what we've seen from Nebraska. 2019 football was preseason top 25.
Yeah, that was
based on nothing that they've done.
That season was a screw up.
And it was a disaster. Basketball with the preseason hype that they had this year. Baseball, like we just said, preseason Big Ten by pretty much every national outlet. It's been disappointment. I'm curious, especially with basketball and football. And Sam, you have some perspective here, having been around a while. When's the last time either of those teams, those programs, ended a season with discernible momentum?
Let's look at the 2009-2010 Doc Sadler basketball team. Let's see.
You wouldn't think it was their NCAA tournament?
No,
Burr?
because Nebraska football wasn't coming off discernible momentum when they fired Bo Pelini.
Well, I was just saying,
Say, like,
either
one,
program.
either one, or for I actually think
either program?
I actually
Yeah, either
think
program.
I actually think
Yeah, it would be that.
the sad
I
part.
thought you meant both.
The sad part for both is that maybe it's not they ended the season this way, but it was when Nebraska hired Scott Frost and hired Fred Hoiberg. It was when they made the coaching changes
Yeah,
because
that's a good
both of these guys were supposed to be the saviors. Both these guys were, I think, relatively young for the coaching profession and had unprecedented success at the college level elsewhere. And there was, if you go back and read the stuff that was written about him, and justifiably so, given the track record of each hire, it was like, hey, we're back. This is it. Nebraska football, especially because it's the prodigal son. Like,
Yeah, I get it.
This is it, man. Fred Hoiberg is going to revolutionize the Big Ten. Let all these plodding big men around here, get them out of here. Not going to be able to stay on the court with all these, 5-out lineups that they're going to be running. It's the same thing with Frost with the spread offense. That was probably the last time, right? Which is sad to think about that it was a coaching
legit.
change.
I think that's fair. I think Scott was here a year, and then Tim got switched out, right? So it was after Scott's year, and there was a lot of momentum, even though they went 4-8, and then Fred was hired. So it was 2019. If you're going both programs, it's just like what they actually did in a football season. You might have to go all the way back to like when Doc was hired and Nebraska was coming off an Alamo Bowl win, something like that. I mean, it's never really synced up since the 90s. I mean, that was I'll never forget when Nebraska won the national title in football. I think in '94 maybe. Prior to the celebration, I think this is true, the Nebraska basketball team came out and did a couple of dunks before they came home and did the celebration. I remember that. But, I think it's always been really hard to get both of those programs right at the exact same time. And the stuff with The stuff with the basketball program in some ways is more frustrating. I mean, and maybe it's because I'm too close to football and I've studied all the Big Ten teams. I think Nebraska's problem in football is truly the context in which they play, and they are in a hell of a dilemma. And Nebraska has always viewed itself as a national program, and they are getting their butt kicked by regional programs that have a very firm, clear identity of who they are.
Right.
And Nebraska does not have that strong identity, and they're probably going to have to go back to being a regional program that defines itself very rigidly and loses by 14 every single time to Ohio State before they can ever go to being a national program. And I think part of what they've tried to do, Nebraska's identity has always been blue blood, blue blood, blue blood, blue blood, and it's not working. Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota are not blue bloods, and they keep kicking Nebraska's butt. And Illinois is doing it now too. And so you have to go all the way back and say, we are not anything if we don't beat the teams that are our peers. I think in basketball...
By the way, there's another overlap. They've been grabbing pieces far and wide.
They are. All I would say about basketball is the paradigm of if you think you're going to play a really fast pace with lesser players and win games doesn't make any sense. I think, and I've said this before, they could have won 5 more games this year if they had been humble enough to slow the hell down and run an offense. We just watched St. Peter's go all the way to the Elite Eight, run the clock down to 5 seconds on the shot clock, and then a jackass takes a 16-foot, he's not a jackass, but they take a 16-foot mid-range jumper and they make it. And they went all the way to the Elite. They beat Kentucky that way. They beat Murray State that way. They beat Purdue that way. Because that's how you win basketball games against teams that are better than you. And Nebraska refused to do that. No. We're going to be us. We're going to lose with honor by 17. It makes no sense to me. So the paradigm for me, it's like they're in the wrong paradigm. You know, like it's like your paradigm is you're going to play a way that you cannot play and win. And they're going to have to change the way they play, or they're going to have to get way better players than they have. And it's just, I mean, it was really frustrating to watch because what was it against Iowa? I think I texted you. This is when they were at Iowa. This is the most frustrating thing I have ever seen. You know, driving into piles 5 seconds into the shot clock, running down the floor to score. You're down by 14 and you're flying down the floor. Trey's throwing it up. You know, I'm like, this is not, what is this?
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the challenge there. Doc Sadler, I mean, he had his flaws as a head coach, but by God, he went into every game trying to win it. And I'm not saying Fred didn't, but like Doc slowed the game down. Remember when he came here? Sideline, baseline to baseline.
Baseline to baseline. 20
Okay,
minutes of hell.
so he got knocked. He got knocked for not doing that. But if they had done it, they would have won less games. Doc won 17, 18, 19, 20 games a year for about a 5-year stretch because he went into a plan. He was like, we're going to slow it down and we're going to win 62 to 58. I respect that. Isn't that kind of what you're there to do? Is win?
It is, but they would just tell you, we think we can win the way we're doing it. They would tell you that they don't think they're at a talent disadvantage with a lot of these other teams. And this year they could point to the recruiting rankings and say, look, we have evidence that says we're not at a talent disadvantage.
Respects Hoiberg for having a binary thought and
Absolutely.
like having a template and sticking to the principle and saying, damn it, we're going to do this until we get it right. I get that. And that would describe who I am kind of a little bit as a thinker, but maybe that's why it frustrates me. Because there's things that I want to do and I can't do them because I keep trying to put a paradigm on it that doesn't work, and it feels like that's what Hoiberg's doing. I think Scott, on the other hand, I think he's trying about as hard as he can at this point, and they're going to try to do everything they can to get it to work, and it may just not. They are in a very hard league.
It's funny because
unbelievably tough.
Scott and Fred arrived in very similar places for different reasons. Fred came in knowing exactly what he wanted to do, and they had a very clear stated identity, and what was supposed to be their bedrock, it just hasn't worked. With Scott, the identity was supposed to be, we're going to spread everyone out, we're going to have teams running around and at speeds that they are not accustomed to, but it kind of turned into last year we kept talking about what's the identity, The identity was we're going to draw up a 60-yard play, but if it's 3rd and 7, what are we doing? We don't know.
It's interesting for me. This discussion kind of reminds me of Shaka Smart and how his success at VCU was to recruit guys who were going to play really tenacious defense. That was the identity. And when he went to Texas, the success did not follow because while he got better players, they didn't have that same mentality. The 4 stars, they weren't interested in playing tenacious defense. They wanted to score. They wanted to be part of something more. And he didn't have success. It didn't translate to that
it's
level.
Like, hey, man, I don't need to full court press to beat this team.
And so Nebraska's situation, it kind of reminds me of that, where they're good enough to get guys that maybe don't want to win any way that they can, but they're not good enough to get the top guys that are going to relate that are going to turn into success. And so I think when you're in that position, you got to find another way. Right? And forever, at least for the football side, that way was run an offense that nobody else was running, like the option, or for basketball for a time, it was slow things way down, even in a league with star power like Kansas.
That's a great point, Evan.
So it just feels like they're stuck right in the middle there with what they want to do and what they feel like they can.
And on the volleyball side, speaking of, again, John Cook, he's ahead. He's where the Royals baseball team was in the mid-20s, mid-2010s. He's ahead of the curve. Defense is the way. So that team is not as talented as some of the other teams as it relates to offense, but he was able to recruit defensive players who absolutely will not let the ball hit the floor. Yep. And when you're that good defensively, it demoralizes the teams that you're playing. And then they're not as good defensively, and it's like a tennis player who just keeps hitting it back. It's Rafael Nadal. And so Cook got ahead of the curve. And there were times last year where he was putting 2 or 3 defensive players on the floor at once who were not attackers, but just prevented points. It was brilliant. It was brilliant stuff. And other teams are going to catch up to it, but that's part of how they got to the finals. You couldn't terminate the ball. And so Cook's ahead of the curve. He's a little bit like Osborne in that way, where Osborne could get ahead of a curve and he could kind of understand if you get out in front, you can look back and you know your competitors are trying to catch up to you. I think that's where Cook's at.
And again, that's what these coaches that we're talking about, Hoiberg and Frost, tried to do. They tried to buck a trend in the Big Ten. They tried to jump in. They tried to change the dynamic
With Frost,
of how
you're
football.
completely right.
Yeah.
With Hoiberg, I think he went back to a playbook that was 5 years old.
Well, yeah, but it goes against how the Big Ten plays for the most part. They tried to, as we've said many times in podcasts, they tried to make the Big Ten adjust to them. Okay. It seems like they need to adjust to the Big Ten.
That's fair.
Let's get a little bit more specific with football here as we wind down spring practice. Obviously, next week we can talk a little bit more about the spring game specifically, but I was struck just in talking with folks this week about I think it's become clear that Nebraska's obviously not done in the transfer portal moving forward. And one of their official visitors coming up for the spring game is Oshon Mathis, TCU transfer, edge rusher extraordinaire, coming as an official visitor for Nebraska. And I thought it would be apt to have a conversation about, obviously they would love to have Mathis into the fold here in the offseason, but where else, based on what you've seen and heard in these few weeks, where else do you think Nebraska needs to do some portal shopping before fall camp here in a few months?
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Okay. I mean, the obvious place to point is the defensive line. We talked about it a couple times on the podcast. We're just unsure. There's too many guys on there that haven't played before, and it is, as Sam has said, it's time for those guys to show up. But I don't know that you want to necessarily be relying on those 2020 guys, 2019 guys to be the guys who drive your defensive line. It's nice to have another to just go ahead and grab a spice to add to that room. Offensive line, I think it's hard to tell because the starters are injured, but I think the presumed starters are injured, but I don't think it could hurt to if there's someone out there in the portal that jumps out to you as someone who can make an impact immediately, go grab them. And that's at every position, but offensive line in particular, because that is a position group that will play a large role in determining whether they go 5-7 or 7-5 or whatever. I'm also starting to get a little bit worried about the tight ends. I don't think it would be a terrible idea to go grab a tight end because everyone's really banged up in that room. And Whipple said yesterday, we think we're going to have everyone back, but injuries are fickle, man. You don't know how long guys are going to take. You don't know what kind of setbacks they could run into along the way. You don't know what they're going to look like when they get back. You don't know if they're going to be the same guy that they were immediately when they return. So I would say that's a few spots they could be shopping for in the portal.
Yeah, I'll stick to the defense. I think edge rusher, obviously Mathis, hopefully. Defensive line, inside linebacker, potentially. Corner, potentially. I know they've added some guys there. They got to get better. They got to get better on defense. They just got to get better. More good players. That's the best way I would put it. Offensively, I don't know. I mean, I think we don't exactly know what Fidoni's situation is, like how long he might be out. I think Hickman will probably be back. Maybe you go with a tight end there. At running back, I think they're going to be in pretty good shape.
Yep.
Quarterback, so long as they hold on to Smothers, which he would be smart to come back. I think you're good there for the cycle. I think you big question marks after him. After Smothers, I think Smothers is a capable backup. Trevor Purdy obviously hitting the reset button health-wise. Harburg, hard to say, and Richard Torres is years away, 2 or 3 years. So that would be, I would say, and then we'll see with wide receiver. You just go based on the names you've heard. 2 of the names you hear are upper class walk-ons, Brody Belt and Wyatt Lever, and that's like 2 of the 7. So what that means is that a lot of the guys who are young aren't getting it done. And I think Mickey Joseph will be given broad freedom, broad latitude to rework the room however he pleases. So I wouldn't count that out. They have the ability to attract players because of who he is. Maybe you go out and get another receiver. It wouldn't surprise me if about 10 guys leave after camp. And that's not common. That's not uncommon when you have a new coaching staff. People are going to be like, what are you talking? No, this is calm down. There's a lot of new offensive coaches. It's bound to happen. There's going to be offensive linemen who leave because they played for a different guy and they can tell they're not going to play. There's going to be a tight end that might leave. There's going to probably be a couple wide receivers who are like, I'm not playing for this guy because I know I'm not going to play. So don't be surprised if about 10 guys leave after camp. So they'll have room for transfers. This roster will be very, very different. It's a tough spot because Scott Frost really does need to win 6 or 7 games next year. But ideally, you'd love this to be a 2-year process, a 2-year conversation. I know I said that at the beginning of last year, but I think it could be a 2-year conversation again this year if they can win 6 or 7 games.
Yeah, and I know Travis said it. Like, you wish in some ways that these moves would have been made a year ago, right?
yeah.
I mean, when they stood pat a year ago with
Couldn't
the
have made
staff,
them a year ago though. Trev wasn't there.
No, I understand exactly. He wished he would have been here a year early, but you wish that those decisions would have been made a year ago to give this new staff some breathing room, so it doesn't become this all or nothing situation.
Because I do think some of why Frost went the direction he went in was via the counsel of someone who was outside of his immediate circle, which was Trev Alberts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Trev is maybe one of the first people outside of T.O., and T.O.'s not going to do that. He's not going to impose. Trev was probably one of the first people who could come to Scott and say, listen, some of your advisors might even be telling you this, but they work for you. I'm going to tell you that you need to get outside of the circle you're in because this isn't working. And I think that gave Scott Frost the freedom to go and get some of the guys that he did. And, 2 of those, I think Donovan Rail is clearly a Scott Frost, a hire, but I don't think Whipple is. I don't think Applewhite is. And, I think Joseph has probably changed the conversation a little bit just in the whole football program. So, again, I'm not saying it's going to be a 2-year conversation, but it would be good if it were.
I don't think you get Mark Whipple or Mickey Joseph specifically if you did this last year, though, because LSU...
That's my point, yeah.
Circumstances wouldn't.
Yeah,
but you could have gotten somebody...
Mark Whipple-esque.
No, you're not going to get those people.
Yeah.
I've got somebody else, but I think Whipple's helpful in the sense that he's older than Frost. He's been a head coach for a long time. He knows, he knows some of the same NFL people that Scott knows. And I really do think Scott respects the NFL. Like, I think he has a healthy respect for that league. And so when you say to somebody, I've coached 3 different teams in the NFL and I helped win a Super Bowl, isn't that all the? I mean, that's the kind of cachet you need. To me, that's a big deal that Whipple's done all those things, and I think it makes quarterbacks listen to him. Like, if you're able to say the words Ben Roethlisberger or Donovan McNabb, that matters.
If Nebraska is able to make a bowl game, win 7, whatever, what on the new staff do you guys look at to say, like, this will have to happen? Is it like the development of the quarterbacks? Is it consistency with the running backs? Like, where do you think the impact of the new hires would show up if Nebraska gets that breakthrough?
I would say from Whipple's standpoint, it would be a more consistent short game, more efficient red zone stuff. Just the way that he has run his offenses in the past, as Sam has said, they throw touchdown passes. They excel in tighter areas. They are more precise. Precision is the key word for him, I think. Mickey Joseph, he's telling you what he's going to do. He's going to turn those guys into dudes. He's going to make these wide receivers you're either going to do everything the way he says it, you're going to practice, you're going to have excellent practice habit, not good practice habits, excellent practice habits, or you're going to be gone. He's just going to, like, the potential impact of that, because I don't know as much about this as you guys. I think that pretty much every Power 5 Division 1 wide receiver has the potential to be awesome. Like, you don't get to that level without being super fast and having game breaking ability, stuff like that. The difference is who gets the most out of it. And I think, judging from the way Mickey talks and the way his players talk about him, I think he is uniquely suited to do that. So that's on the offensive side of the ball. Defensive side of the ball. Oh, we're talking about new coaches. I'm talking about
just
the running backs.
Made, yeah.
It's just the consistency, knowing who the guys are in the room, developing guys who are going to be those guys, and the guys that you can point to and say, I feel comfortable giving this guy 20 carries a game, not rotating in and out like they were last year. And then offensive line, I don't think they have to be dominant and, whatever Nuri said about pushing the line of scrimmage 4 yards at a time. You don't have to do it. You just have to hold up, especially if we're talking about Whipple introducing more quick game concepts. Just survive for a few seconds, and then hopefully you have a quarterback who is not being asked to do as much or hold on to the ball for so long.
Yeah. What Jimmy said, plus special teams. Like, if they can get better there, if the punting is better, if the place kicking is decent, place kicking comes and goes, and then your return games are respectable, not elite, but Trey Palmer doesn't let the ball go over his head by 15 yards. When you return a kickoff, when you choose to return a kickoff, you return it to the 32 instead of the 14. That kind of stuff. So little areas there, but I think everything Jimmy said is accurate. Once we get to see the spring game, we can talk more about the run game that I think they're going to have. It's hard to see until you see it. But coming off the ball would not be unique to Nebraska. There's what I think we're going to see is something that other teams do, and there's weaknesses to it too. So we'll just have to see. I think the run game picture is going to look better so long as Grant stays healthy and Yant stays at the weight that he's at. I think you can run behind their pads. You can get some good things. So, I don't know.
The O-line part to me is really fascinating because, we talk about all these. Nebraska hired a bunch of professional, proven coaches. I mean, Mickey Joseph has done it before. Mark Whipple certainly has done it before. Applewhite has had success elsewhere. Bill Bush has had success.
Oh, yeah.
And so, the Raiola piece is fascinating to me because he's the clear outlier in that particular pattern. And, oh, by the way, it's at a position that's, critical to winning in the Big Ten. The receiver portion and the quarterback and the running backs, that doesn't matter if you're getting blown up the middle, every drive. So, how that looks different, how those pieces come together, the stamp that Raiola leaves on that, to me, is the biggest wild card of all, because we don't have a track record to look at with him like we do with some of those other guys. So I think even when you can maybe assume some progress or change at those other hires, the Raiola piece to me, it's just a total wild card, and it's going to be hard to discern what that impact is until the games start coming.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be that different. If they do what I think they're going to do, it won't be that different from what Mike Riley was doing. I don't think so, but we'll see. It's a run game that's designed to get downhill as quickly as possible, pop runs when you can, and most importantly, set up the ability to pass off of it. Like, if your offensive line is coming hard downhill, those linebackers do not know, get play to play, what it's going to look like. And so they're coming hard, boom, you pop it up, you throw it over those linebackers to a tight end, that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's kind of what Kansas State does. Watch Kansas State when you were down there a couple of years ago. It's not that different. K-State runs a good offense. I like their offense. I like what they're going to more than what they were doing. Let's put it that way. I like it. But it doesn't mean they're going to run for 270 yards a game. And if people think that's what's going to happen, they may be mistaken. This isn't necessarily going to be a 200 yards a game offense from a running perspective. They might run for 165 and run for 5 yards a carry, and that's dang good. That's exactly what you're looking for. And you got one guy that runs for 800 and another guy that runs for 750, and at the end of the year, you're maybe not averaging 225 yards because your quarterback's not running for a bunch. But you look and you say, hey, they ran for 165 and they threw for 255 and they ended up averaging 410, but they scored 31 a game and they won 7 games as a result. That's offense. Too often Nebraska was enamored with yards and enamored with getting the quarterback involved, and then they just get the quarterback hurt.
Right.
I still can't believe, Nebraska played last season with a quarterback whose jaw was wired shut for half the season. What can you say? They've got to find a way to protect that guy.
And it seems like they will. I mean, I can't imagine Mark Whipple's going to let him
You just don't
run
know.
it 20 times a game. But we'll see.
If they can't run the ball downhill, you have to involve that 11th guy, and that's the quarterback, because you have to try to generate run games somehow, unless you're Purdue. Now, Purdue won 9 games last year, running for 84 yards a game last year. Mm-hmm. But that was David Bell.
Yeah, they turned their quick passing game into their run game.
They did, and plus they had a receiver who was David Bell. And I don't know if Nebraska. I don't know if Trey Palmer's David Bell. So Purdue had been practicing that for 4 years to get to that point. But most teams don't run for 84 yards and also win 9 games. They just don't do it.
Anything else from you guys?
Anything else? No.
No, I'll just say this: the two biggest points that Sam made today: recruit good players, score points, not yards. Sometimes it's simple. It's simple. It really is.
Nebraska's not been good at the things that are most basic: score touchdowns in football, shoot well in basketball. They have not done a very good job of that. And in baseball, I don't really know. I actually think they do a lot of the things well, except they don't hit the baseball.
They haven't.
They don't hit the baseball where you're supposed to hit the baseball.
Defensively, that's what the coaches would say is where they start. Don't make the mistakes. Let the other team make the mistakes, and then sort of the plus assets in terms of hitting come from that. But that's where they've been disappointed a lot this year too. But all right then.
All right.
I don't know that we solved the world's problems, but maybe we're getting a little bit closer to it. Thanks for listening. Spring game next week. We'll be back to preview that and then break it down afterwards too.